Hey, this is John Paul White, and you're listening to Walking the Floor.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senors and senoritas. This is Chris Shiflett back at it again here on Walking the Floor, your favorite podcast. It's been a little slow over here. Been kind of just enjoying my summer, hitting the beach, taking my kids to summer camp, surfing a little bit here and there, doing a couple of gigs and things, but not too much, and not doing much in the way of podcasting at all, really. Just been kind of slow, but that's about to change because I got a ton of interviews lined up around Americana Fest, and I will be touring out to Americana Fest with a great band called the Cordovas. Not only are they going to open the shows, they're going to be my band on that run of dates. I can't wait. I haven't even played with them yet. I'm going out there next week to go jam and see what that sounds like. I think it's going to be exciting. So get your tickets today. ChrisShiflettMusic.com. Everything's for sale. It kicks off up there in Colorado at the Dierks Bentley Festival and goes through the Midwest and into the South a little bit, and then winds up, like I said, at Americana Fest, where I'm going to be doing a bunch of shows. Not sure if any of that's public knowledge yet, but if it isn't, it will be soon. So check it out. Also, I just want to address, I would be remiss if I didn't address this a little bit. I played a Bernie Sanders rally last week and posted some stuff about that on my social media. And I try not to be preachy about it. I just posted what I was doing, but that doesn't stop a lot of people out there from getting super offended and kind of getting aggressive with the, you're a dumb socialist and why don't you just shut up and play guitar, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff that's kind of designed to just oppress dissent. And I don't buy into it, and I never have. And I'm not going to just not be who I am. And I know that bugs people, and you have the freedom to unfollow me, the freedom to not come to my shows, the freedom to not listen to my podcast, and you don't have to buy my t-shirts, you don't have to stream my music, but you cannot ask me to shut my mouth, because that just ain't gonna happen, brothers and sisters. I am unapologetically who I am, and if you don't like it, that's cool. But I'm just going to keep on being me, and you keep on being you. And if you send me your crazy direct message, whiny, misinformed nonsense, just be aware I might just go ahead and post it. And again, I know that makes a lot of you folks out there uncomfortable, but I don't really want that nonsense clogging up my inbox. So you've been warned. All right, let's get to the ads here. All right, Zounds.com. Nobody makes the best gear from the best brands more affordable than Zounds. You never have to pay full price all at once when you buy from Zounds. If you use their exclusive payment plans, you can create music, not how am I going to pay for this headaches. And they, of course, make it as easy for you as possible. So get on over to Zounds.com and get all your music gear today. All right, let's get on over to the interview. All right, so you probably know John Paul White from being one half of the duo The Civil Wars, who broke up at the height of their success, like when they were riding high, which is always kind of a fascinating thing when you see someone walk away from success, especially, in this business, in the music industry, success that you gotta claw and fight for. And we talk a lot about that. I don't think it's ever been discussed publicly, the real, exact reasons that they broke up. We don't get into that, but we get into a lot of stuff surrounding that and his time after the band broke up and kind of regrouping and getting back in touch with his family, and then finding the renewed interest in embarking on a solo career again, which he's doing now, taking it to the people, man, out there doing shows. He came through LA when he was on tour, and I was lucky enough to get an hour or so with him to have this wonderful conversation. So this is John Paul White on Walking the Floor. Where are you at in a tour right now?
We're about halfway. We're about halfway on this West Coast run. We're heading up. We'll end up Seattle, Spokane, and work our way all the way back home. So,
okay.
When
did your record come out?
Holy cow! April. Yeah.
So you're still kind of at the front end of things.
I am. I am, and this is the first real run of the full band.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff that I was doing just me and a guitar.
Like on your last solo record?
Yeah.
Really?
And then the lead up to this. But, I mean, the last solo record, I did some full band stuff too, but this one's a more fleshed out version with steel and fiddle as well.
Right.
Yeah, and so this feels more adult. This feels more like, you know, I feel like we're really hitting on all cylinders now.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud to get these folks in front of people.
And that's so representative of your latest record, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the most sort of like, I don't know, there's like a classic country feel
Thank you.
to your latest record that maybe it's not like it wasn't there at all in the stuff you've done before, but maybe this one's a little more realized in that
a little
direction.
more overt, yeah.
Right. Like, was that something you sort of set out to do? What do you think was influencing that direction?
I think it was something that I'd always loved because my dad wore me out with Countrypolitan records, like Fred Foster records, Chet Atkins records.
Yeah.
And I think he was trying to get away from his crappy childhood and he didn't gravitate toward the honky-tonk stuff as much because I think he was trying to, that was his life already. He didn't need that. He needed to hear somebody like, you know, Jim Reeves or later Don Williams, somebody that taught like him and grew up like him, but, you know, showed him hope of a better place, a little bit more.
Like you're saying, he was living honky tonk, but but his music was to escape from that.
Yeah, he didn't need it from his music. So I always loved it, but I was looking for it. I was searching for it. I was craving it. I was trying to find it in a modern setting. I couldn't find anybody that's really doing that thing, the troubadour. Maybe Rufus Wainwright, obviously not a country artist.
Right.
You know, there's very few.
It's interesting you say that because in this time when there's like a lot of throwback outlaw sound and stuff, and maybe some throwback honky tonk, you know, Bakersfield sound kind of thing happening out there. You're right. There is not a ton of people sort of referencing Countrypolitan.
There's not, and it's not me trying to look at the musical landscape and find a hole that I should fill because of, you know, I think that would fall flat pretty fast. I think people would figure it out. Like you're just pretending. You're just going for a piece of the market. But and I love all these artists that we're both talking about.
Yeah.
You know, I love, and they're all friends of mine too. But it was never something that I gravitated toward. I love Merle Haggard, but most of the Merle stuff I like is the earlier stuff and Silver Wings and Misery and Gin and things like that. But and with Willie, you know, Crazy and Funny How Time Slips Away, way more than the later stuff. So that's where my bread's buttered, and I've figured if I'm craving it that much, and I'm at a position where I could make whatever record I want to, because in some ways it felt like my first record. Because my first solo record I made for Capitol Records, it was a rock record. I need to get you that. It's called The Long Goodbye, and it didn't ever come out. Andy Slater was over there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Ron Lafitte and those guys, and they all got fired while I was mixing my record. And so
that is the classic major label conundrum.
I know. Everybody has that everybody has that story, and I've got my own, and it was all.
So by the time the record was gonna come out, you no longer had your champion at the label.
I didn't even get that far. I was halfway through the mix process, and they merged with Virgin, and and Jason Flom was head of Virgin, and he took over the merger, and so all the Virgin artists stayed on. Well, they told me like we love your record. Go ahead and finish mixing it. And I said okay, and they approved the budget. But then they say, well, we changed our mind. We're not going to put it out. So
have you like worked with or come across at like the Grammys or anything? Any of those folks that from that time, like, I told you so. I was right, motherfucker.
No, but what's funny is I don't know that I was right because that record never came out. And
so wait, that's not the one. That's not your solo record. That's because I saw you had a much earlier one, like in 2008, like pre-Civil
That's what
Wars.
I'm talking about. That's the one I'm talking about.
Oh, okay, so that is in
in
Spotify.
Yeah,
right.
It is now,
right?
Because and for 10 years after that, it didn't exist to the world. I half-heartedly stuck it up on iTunes, but I never even talked about it and put it out in the world. I was bitter about it.
Right.
And also I had kind of moved on from that thing. That was me in that era, and it wasn't me anymore. And so I was just like, it is what it is. And I had a good time, and they let me make that record at Fame back in Florence with Mike Hedges.
Well, didn't you make some of your new record at Fame as well?
I did. I've done a little, I think most of my records I've done some at Fame, and then the rest at my place. I've got a place.
You have your own studio.
Not unlike this. It's a house, and we didn't try to make it a studio. It's just it's very
threw some gear in there.
living room. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I work. My partner is Ben Tanner, who is in the Alabama Shakes.
Sure.
And he's got great ears, and just he knows how to get great sounds from a room.
And he did he produce this new record?
He did. He co-produced it. Yeah.
I noticed like okay, so you made some of it at your place, some of it over at Fame, and it looked like you had a bunch of different people playing on it.
Yeah.
Like, how do you figure that out?
Well,
because you just mentioned this the first time you're sort of going out with like full band setup in a while. Like, when you're going to make a record, how do you sort of determine who's going to be on the session?
More often than not, it's folks from there in the Shoals. You know, like David Hood and Spooner Oldham are still there doing it.
Really?
The original Swampers. And so more often than not, it's me and Ben playing a lot of stuff, and then my band. But for this record, I knew I wanted it to have a certain country jazz kind of swagger to it that we weren't so adept at. So I found, John Estes is playing upright bass on it, and he's fantastic, but he plays lots of instruments as well, so I had him. And then Pat Bergeson. And Pat, you should definitely know, he's a Chet protege. Chet heard him play in New York City and convinced him to move to Nashville. And he plays a lot like Chet. He's got one of Chet's guitars. He's a certified guitar player, that whole acronym that Chet originated. And
wait, now what is that? I'm not familiar with that.
It's CGP, and there's a very elite group.
Is there an old leather-bound book somewhere in Nashville with the list of names?
Maybe they've got it like ingrained on their guitars and stuff. Yeah, or they'll even tongue-in-cheek they'll put it behind their name. Steve Warner, CGP. Right. And Chet has deemed them a certified guitar player. So Pat's one of those. And
how many of those cats are still around in Nashville and still active that you can still? Well,
Pat wasn't active at the time that stuff was really cooking. He's a protege of it, and so he does his thing and plays on lots of sessions and stuff, but probably isn't asked to do that thing that I asked him to do very often. And he just relished it because it was like Chet was in the room. I didn't want him to regurgitate Chet's licks, but I did want that sensibility, that sophistication. And almost downright jazz kind of thing that he was doing, along with the songs that I write that kind of straddle a line between all the worlds.
See, this is an interesting thing. This is something I actually encounter with this podcast when I'm interviewing somebody like Merle Haggard or somebody that's a legendary dude. There's sort of this, the bygone eras of music that guys like us are nostalgic for and appreciate. But a lot of times when you encounter those folks, they don't necessarily, they don't hold, they were there. It's just like what they did, and they're not nostalgic about it the way that the people that came after them are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if, like, I know you wrote with, Whispering Bill Anderson, Bobby Braddock, and some of these guys. Like, did you sit down with them? Did you go to them because you liked the way that they write and you were hoping to capture a little bit of that on the thing, or was it any more overt than that? Did you, you know what I mean? Like, because some people, they want to move on from the thing they did in 1968 or whatever. They're like, that was then, I'm doing this new, check it out. I got this new digital, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's that thing with musicians, it's funny. You encounter a lot of the old players and they play the jankiest modern stuff because you realize the things that they were playing at that time were the latest, greatest thing.
That's true.
And they still want the latest, greatest thing.
Yeah. And
we're all going to probably make that mistake too when we get to that age.
You can be damn sure we're going to do it. I kind of hope that I do. I hope I'm always adapting and changing.
Yeah, sure.
I hope I still am proud of my work. Yeah. But I hope I still want to play it. I hope that I'm creating stuff that I always want to play. We all hope that. But I was around Rick Hall a lot, who was the famed producer, produced Aretha and Wilson Pickett and all that stuff. And he had no interest in making a soul record after all those years of doing it. You know, people had approached him a lot about doing, let's do a throwback R&B record. You know.
Right.
He's like, I did that. I have no urge to do it. I don't want to cash that check.
Right.
I want to stay with the times. He famously took all of their tube gear out of the studio, out of Fame, that all that stuff was recorded on, and dug a hole on his farm, on his ranch, and buried it all, because solid state was the new thing.
Right.
And we're getting with the times, boys. We're getting rid of these old antique clunkers.
Yeah.
And ceremoniously covered it up, and no one knows.
Oh, really?
I've
He
talked
didn't
to
like
his
mark
son.
it on a map or anything?
No, it was not to be. And I've talked to his son about it, and he said I was little and I remember it happening. And he said, but he did that a lot, burying stuff on, and he said, you know, there's probably hundreds of different places where things. He said, there's no way and it's a huge ranch. So
somebody's going to be
never
developing that in like subdivision someday,
Yes.
and be like, what the fuck are all these tubes?
It'd be priceless, even if it never worked again.
Yeah.
Just
Oh yeah.
knowing those folks sang
That
through
was
it.
that gear.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So I honestly, I didn't ask them to go back to that era at all. I said, let's just write.
Did you know
the
those
bit.
folks
I
prior
did
to that?
not. I'd never met them.
Right.
I worshipped them from afar, and I was terrified. But they were sweethearts. They were just like us, you know, which was disarming.
Right.
That they were kind of, you know, they had a lot of, you know, social anxieties and self-esteem issues, just like me, and
Just
like,
insecure artist-writer
yeah,
people.
you know, is this good? I don't know. Is this good?
Right.
But at the same time, they had this just fervor that they were so excited to write a song that was just palpable, that I hope, you know, and I just connected in with it, and I hope that I've always got it.
Do they still write a lot? Because like one of the first interviews I ever did for my podcast was with Red Simpson, and who's, you know, wrote a gazillion songs.
Yeah.
But I interviewed him when he was very old, and he was just like, nah, I don't care anymore. I quit.
Yeah.
He had really like.
I encountered
He didn't
a number
care
of
anymore.
those.
You know, he didn't want to do it.
Yeah, Waylon Holyfield was one of the first ones that I sat down with, and Waylon wrote like most of the Don Williams catalog. He and Bob McDill wrote just tons of those things, and that's one of my favorite artists. And so I really wanted to sit down with him, and I knew he'd already quit, and so I said, he said, we don't have to write, but I want to sit with you, and I want to see if I can get that spark going. And if you do, you do. If you don't, you can tell me some Don Williams stories. And that's what we did. And he said, man, I think I've written my last song. He said, and it's not out of bitterness. It's not because people don't want my songs. He said, I've said what I want to say, and now I just want to hang out with my wife and enjoy my golden years. And he said, but we'll talk about it. And so we talked about this song idea I had, and it was somewhat about reincarnation or whatever. And he was like, oh, all right, you got my interest. You know, I hadn't written about that. I've written about everything else. But at the end of the day, he was like, man, I think I'm done. But I'm gonna think about it for a while, and I'll holler back at you. He hollered back, and he was like, man, he said, I had so much fun hanging with you. Please come back. Let's have dinner. But I'm done.
Wow. I can dig that.
I can dig it too. Yeah. I don't know if I wonder if I'll ever, you know, most of us just hang on for dear life and can't get out. And he was so at peace. He was so proud of his body of work. And Whitey Schaefer was the opposite. Whitey wrote All My Exes Live in Texas, and That's the Way Love Goes from Merle, and so many others. Great singer. And he hadn't written for 10 years because he was just disgruntled and felt like nobody wanted. Like
stop getting cuts, that sort of thing.
He felt like the Music Row didn't want the kind of song that he wrote. And he was right. And so he just said, well, I just won't write. And for 10 years, and his wife put us together and just pushed him and pushed him and pushed him and talked him into doing it. And we struggled.
Really?
He couldn't get the thing turning in his head.
Really?
And he said so. He said, I just feel so stupid. He said, I just feel like nothing's coming. And it was an interesting moment to know that, you know, that could be all of us if we let this thing rust and and we don't keep it flowing, that
Yeah.
it can gum up. And I said, and I had a verse and chorus before I walked in there because I wasn't going in there empty-handed. And he was like, "This is great. I love this. I love it so much. I'm sorry. I just got nothing." And I said, "Well, let me leave it with you and see if things start turning for you. And if it doesn't, I don't care." Because
Right.
he sat down and played "I'm Never Going to Fall," or he played "That's the Way Love Goes" for me, and sang beautifully. And I said, "I've got that, and I'm good, and we're friends now, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna come hang out with you." And about 2 weeks later, she wrote me an email, and he had finished the song. And it's,
Really?
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
which song is that?
It didn't end up on the record. It's called "I'm Never Going to Fall in Love Again," and I'm gonna put it out there in the world. But I'm gonna do an EP of some of these other songs that I wrote with all my heroes.
Yeah.
I'll get it out in the world. But I sang it at his funeral. He passed away within a year after that, and it was the only song.
Heavy.
She told me, she was like, "All right, here's directions on how to get to the house. I hope you know that this is a big deal." And I said, I know it's a big deal. I love Mr. Schaefer. And she was like, "No." She said, it's different than that. She said, "The last person that tried to write with Whitey and he turned down was Loretta Lynn."
Really?
And I know that Tracy, his wife, had a lot to do with it because she was a fan.
Right.
She was
right.
like, "You should do this," and she'd play my stuff around the house, and he'd listen. That's pretty good, And then the next day, I know she made it happen. So,
Right.
So it's something I'll never forget.
I mean, that's amazing. Like that's. I know you come out of a songwriting. You worked as a songwriter in Nashville and Music Row and all that prior to success with Civil Wars. But did you have many of those kinds of experiences in those days when you were first kind of starting out on that path? I imagine that there's got to be a transitional thing of the new guy coupled with the guy that's been there for a while, and
All the time.
I hear from my other songwriter friends that they get in a room with guys that wrote some of those classic songs.
Yeah, it happened all the time. It's a small world, and I wrote 9 to 5, 3 to 4 days a week. I still live down in the Shoals, and I drive back and forth and sleep on somebody's floor or couch or whatever. Yeah.
So you didn't actually live in Nashville?
No, 10 years I'd drive back and forth and made a lot of friendships I still have today. But wrote with, it's funny is I wrote with some of the biggest and most prolific songwriters, and wrote good songs with a lot of those folks. But sometimes we just kind of stare at each other and laugh, and it wouldn't work out. And then I'd write with somebody that never had anything, probably way less talent. But for some reason, that muse comes into the room, and at the end of the day, they may not have written much that day, but for some reason, that magic happens. You get back together again, and it does it again. You're just like,
how much of that
tend to know?
Like, how much of that is like craft and skill, and I do this 5 days a week kind of thing, and how much of it is sheer inspiration for you?
At that time, it was 90% craft.
Really?
Yeah, because I was trying to write for other people.
Right.
And I wasn't trying to get anything of myself into it. I was trying to get on the radio. I was trying to get on a
Did
Tim
you get
McGraw
cuts?
record.
Like, did you have success in that realm?
Not when I created like that. I just kept falling short of the mark because I couldn't guess what they wanted to sing. I couldn't guess what radio wanted to play. And so I finally just said, fuck it. I'm just going to make music for myself, spend their money. I was on EMI at the time. I'm just going to spend their money and make a bunch of demos and have fun, and then go back to college. I had a degree from college, but it was in music, and I thought, well, I'll just go back and get a computer degree or something.
Right.
And immediately I started getting cuts. I got like a Rascal Flatts cut and a Leanne Rimes cut and a Faith Hill cut. And it was all songs that I just thought, there's no way they're going to touch them. I'm just going to make them for myself.
Right.
That's eventually how I got my record deal.
Really?
I kept doing that.
Yeah.
And EMI passed it around in the family, and I started getting taking some meetings, and ended up with a deal. Yeah. So after the Civil Wars, I just cut everything off. I just I didn't care if I walked across the street to play a song for somebody.
Right.
And I had this moment of like, I hear people talk about I couldn't go to sleep last night because this song popped in my head, and I'm just like, bullshit. You're romanticizing this thing,
Right.
and it's not that. I never had that. I always turned it on to write and then turned it off and went home and played with the kids and made dinner and that sort of thing. So when I cut it all off and decided I'm just probably not even going to do this anymore, I don't care, that's when it took about 1.5 years and stuff started growing back and songs started coming back. And so I had this first realization of, okay, maybe I'm meant to write songs. And then as soon as I wrote them, I wanted to play them for people, and it pissed me off because I didn't want to tour. I didn't want to get in a van. I didn't want to do interviews.
Right.
I didn't want to do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I was happy, very happy.
Right.
And but I wanted to look people in the eye and sing a song and see if it hurt them, or if it helped them, or if it changed them, and have that reciprocated back to me. And I realized finally, maybe I'm supposed to do this.
Right.
Because you grow up in a little town, and if you can carry a tune or you can play guitar really well, well, then you think, okay, well, yeah, this is my dream. It's everybody else's dream.
Right.
Why shouldn't it be mine? I can do it. Lucky me.
Where'd you grow up?
Loretta, Tennessee, which is just across the state line from Muscle Shoals, about
Okay.
20 minutes north. So I didn't leave that area until my 20s.
Interesting. So you never did that thing like, I'm moving to Nashville to make it,
No. I mean, I wanted to make it, but I grew up in an area where that just didn't really seem reasonable.
Right. So you weren't looking to be like, grinding it out on a van tour, being a band guy. You were more thinking at that time, like, I'm going to be a writer.
No, it was the other way around, but I couldn't get anybody to pay any attention to me as a singer.
Right.
I just wanted to sing. I didn't want to write songs. And when I got to high school, I got the bug and was playing in crappy cover bands and doing that thing and enjoying it, loving it, having a good time. Whatever would get the girls' attention, that's what I did. You want me to sing Bad Company? Okay, cool. You want AC/DC? By God, that's George Jones. That's what I'll do. And I had no sense of who I was at all. So I did that for quite a while, playing bars up and down the state line.
Yeah.
The idea of buying a van, I couldn't. We were just way too poor. So we would somehow get, we'd do like a 30-mile, 50-mile, 100-mile radius, and that's about it. And couldn't get anybody to pay any attention to us, and didn't really feel like I was even close to it. So I went back to college and met Walt Aldridge, who's a songwriter of EMI and had written 2 songs of the year for the country market. And he saw promise in some of the little songs I was writing. He never saw me as an artist. He saw me as a songwriter. And I said, if that gets me in the door, fine. I'm a songwriter. I'll be a songwriter.
Yeah.
If that gets people to let me sing, that's what I'll do. And it was 10 years later before anybody let me sing.
It's funny, you touched on something like when you said, like, I didn't want to get in the van and I was happy, where I was at, and I didn't want to do interviews and all that stuff. Yeah. I think about this all the time, and it's no doubt, it's not a coincidence because I got a solo record coming out and I've been in that hustle for the last, year or whatever, doing all the stuff that isn't about the music, all the other parts of it, the grind. And I think about it a lot. Like, there's so many people between you writing your song and anybody ever hearing it.
Yeah.
There's all the people on your team. There's all the people that aren't on your team that you have to get, Spotify or whatever it is, the guy that books the festival and all that stuff. And there's so much, like, I feel like personally, I expend so much stress and energy on shit that kind of ultimately doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how do you navigate that? Because, you've got some success, and I'm sure you've got a good team around you and people helping you out. But how involved do you get in the minutia of, preparing your record to be released and all that stuff?
It's changed. It's definitely mutated over the years. There was a time, before the Civil Wars, I handled everything, and very, very moderate success. I was OCD about everything. I was a control freak. No one could do it as well as me. Or if it's going to fail, I want it to be on my terms. It's just, I am my mom's son. You know, if you want it done right, do it yourself kind of guy. And so, but then when the Civil Wars came along, it was just so overwhelming, the rise of the band, that I had to just let go of everything and say, tell me where to stand.
Right.
And so there's good and bad to that,
Sure.
of course. So after the Civil Wars, I found a happy medium. You know, I surrounded myself with people that were really good at their job, and until they screwed it up, not to say that anyone screwed it up, but until they do, I'm going to trust them.
Right.
Because they have expertise I don't.
Sure.
They have experience that I don't, and I got to let them do that. And I'm probably more hands-on than most artists. And now I have my own label, so Single Lock Records, and we put the record out through my label. And so I have to wear that hat too, to figure out what's good for me as an artist and what's good for me as a label owner.
Right.
Is more often than not the same thing.
Right.
I've learned.
Interesting.
And that's not the way it works in the rest of the world, but it can be. We can be codependent and it be healthy for each of us.
Is that a label that you like? Are you starting that too? Are you putting out other people's releases and
That's
stuff?
how
too?
it started.
Oh, really?
I wasn't even writing songs when we started the label. It was honestly Ben that I mentioned earlier and Will Trapp. Will's a friend of ours in the show's financial guy. They had already had the impetus of the idea of it, and St. Paul and the Broken Bones was going to be one of the first artists that was going to come out of it. And they approached me and asked, would you be interested in being a part of this? And it seemed like a good way for me to dip my toe back into the pool. And because it was funny, I had a new vantage point of like, you know what, I can help other people facilitate their vision. I've got a pretty good Rolodex now. I can call some folks and help get them a booking agent, get them a decent lawyer that ain't going to screw them, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that felt good. That felt like, I don't know that I want to create yet, but I wouldn't mind using this experience, using this power for good.
Right.
And so I got in and did that. And then the songs started coming, and it morphed into, well, I got to put my money where my mouth is. I can't put this record out on another label and look my artists in the face.
Right.
Knowing that we were a really small label and we're going to have a hard time, keeping up with a record of mine, mostly because, I knew there'd be demand because of the Civil Wars, that people would at least pay attention to the first one.
Sure.
Whether it would have to live on its own merits once they heard it. But I knew that was going to be tough, but putting out that St. Paul record helped because they definitely, had a rocket attached to their ass. And so we grew up pretty quick with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Made a few mistakes and figured some shit out.
Made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
But we did it all with a really good heart and with the artist hat on most of the time. And we're really just partners with most of our artists. It's like, 50-50 after expenses. When give them a lot of creative control and we give them a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability. A lot of what we do is teaching artists, here's what we do and here's what we don't. Here's what a record label will do for you. If that's what you want, that's probably where you should be. But if you work with us, here's what we think is important, what's not, and then you can farm out some of the things that you think are a good idea that we don't do.
Right.
We don't have any problem with that. So
it reminds me of before I was in Foo Fighters, I was in this band called No Use for a Name that was on a punk rock label in the 90s called Fat Records, and it was like a small label but had some big artists and was owned by a guy that was in a big punk rock band, this guy Fat Mike.
Oh yeah.
And he was like the greatest like label head that I ever dealt with, because you'd ask him a question, he'd give you an answer.
Yeah.
It's like,
if you like it or not.
This is what we do,
Yeah.
We're going to do this, this, and this, and that's what we're going to do.
That took us a while to
Yeah.
get there, to be able to say, because we wanted to make our artists happy.
Sure.
And we wanted them to be successful and to pay their bills and be able to do this and put food on the table.
It's hard to make a buck in this industry nowadays.
It's so hard, and it's so it's hard to tell an artist no when they want to do something, when they want to work and they
Yeah.
want something that's going to help the record. And so we had to go through that learning curve of like, okay, we did this and it didn't really move the needle, but this did, and this. So the thing that keeps us afloat and allows us to thrive is that we keep our costs really low.
Right.
Our records, as good as I think they sound, you know, the Dylan LeBlanc record and Donnie Fritz record and all those, you know, we can make most of those records for $10K. And so they don't start out.
I think I just figured out where I'm making my next record.
Hey, I got a contract right here. You can sign. We, you know, we've got our own studio there, and
Right.
our talent pool there, musician wise, is pretty deep and affordable. And it's that way artists don't have this huge hole they're digging out of from day one.
Yeah.
We can usually recoup most of our records, not too big a time if. But there's some records we put out that we know we're not,
Right.
but they're the right
just
thing
love
to
it.
do.
Yeah.
They're the right thing because that artist needs a voice and the world needs to know about them. And it's also good for our label. It's a good look. It's that we put out music that we love, and we'll be damned if anybody can find a record on there that we don't have passion about, whether
Right.
it's sellable or not. You know, there's some records that help raise the tide
Sure.
for those other ones,
Yeah.
and that's a cool thing.
So, okay, so after you made your first solo record that
Yeah.
got shelved at the time, what was happening? Like, what led to the Civil Wars getting together? How did that happen?
I was in a position of like, as I was after the Civil Wars, I was just like, well, maybe I'm just a, you know, well, this is sort of different, but maybe I'm not going to be a singer. You know, I thought after that debacle and trying to sell that record to other labels and them being like, well, if Capitol doesn't want to put it out, we don't, which wasn't exactly the truth because everybody got fired, but regardless, it was tainted.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't find a home for it. And I thought, you know what, maybe somebody's trying to tell me something, that I'm just meant to write songs, because I was doing okay doing that.
Right.
So I thought that's what I'd be doing. And so I wasn't incredibly bitter about it. It was just, this is how it is, and I need to be mature, and I'm a dad and a husband and I'm a provider, and I need to be level-headed about this. And the dream was great, and I chased it, and I got farther than most, and so it's all good. And so that was kind of where my head was when we did a rider round. No, not a rider round, but they put a bunch of riders in one space, like about 20, 25 riders, and drew straws. And for 2 or 3 days, people would pair up in different rooms and write songs for an artist. And that's how Joy and I ended up meeting. Just drew straws and ended up in a room writing a song, and still had no intentions of being of singing really professionally again, much less being in a duo or a band or something, because you know, I'd been in bands when I was young. It was always hard. I mean, obviously, you know,
Sure.
and you know, keeping it together, keeping all those egos from exploding at some certain time, you know, and that's how it is. And I wasn't sure I wanted to, you know, go down that road. I already had, you know, wife and kids to navigate and everything too. And then I knew what an uphill battle all that is to start a baby band and get in a van and slug it out, and how long that takes. And at that point I was already in my late 30s, you know, before, you know, when we first met. I thought, man, my ship sailed.
Right.
You know, that, but I knew that it was good. And I knew there was an instant click that, you know, our voices worked. And so we wrote some more, and that was really good. And so we demoed them, and those were really good. And everybody in the office was just like, hang on, this is different. What's this about? What's the deal here? And so it just kept growing to where, all right, I guess this is a thing. I guess this is a duo. This is happening. And I think probably the best things worked that way,
Right.
because there was never any hey, we sing well together. We should start a band. It was more like, I think just things grew to a point of like, well, I guess we're a band, you know? And so.
Did you guys tour as a duo? Like, did you take a full band out, or was it just the two of you?
Never.
Because the only time I ever saw you guys play live was at the Grammys. And we were there for whatever reason, and I remember. I remember you guys playing like it was like in the round or something. It was in the middle of, I want to say it was maybe in Madison Square Garden or something. Does that sound about right?
No, it was Staples.
Staples. Yeah. Okay, yeah. And it was just the two of you on stage. It was very powerful. Like if I'm not mistaken, I remember that record when it was like blowing up and happening as kind of inhabiting like a similar space to maybe like the first Chris Stapleton record in the sense that, not sonically, but in the sense that like it was commercially successful, but well outside the mainstream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that?
Oh,
like almost like the country record, if you're going to call it country, whatever you want to call it, like that other country artists pointed to as like, that's the shit.
Yeah. It was such a strange thing that we couldn't really put our finger on exactly what we were doing or where we fit or where we didn't, and it could have probably been, I don't know if it had been more successful or less successful if we had fit in a box. I think because we were able to straddle the folk, country, indie, pop world, that Southern Gothic thing, that we were able to be palatable for a lot of different people, and we went with that. But, you know, more often than not, with the things we created, we didn't really have a choice about. It just came out that way. And she's from California and was a pop girl, and I was an Alabama guy that grew up on country music. So it was going to be some weird amalgamation of all those things and not necessarily fit. But I remember that night, well, for many reasons, obviously the performance, but when we won, came off stage, and y'all had just won, and you were standing waiting to talk to an interviewer or take a photo or something, and of course we were giddy and talking and hooping and hollering, and I remember Dave turning toward us and just kind of like nodding, like, yeah, it's exciting, right? Yeah, it's exciting. You know, like, and he was,
it's a good time, right?
Yeah, he wasn't being mean, but it was just like, we're trying to do something, dial it back. Just, I know it's great. And I just remember being instantly like, holy shit, there's Dave Grohl. And then secondly, I don't care if we're bothering you, Dave.
Right. We just want to fucking
enjoying this moment. Yeah. You can live with it. Yeah. You'll forget this in 20 minutes that I, was too loud for an interview. But it was surreal, you know. And that whole night,
those nights always are, right?
Brian Wilson and Paul McCartney were having a conversation like 5 feet from me, and it's like, this ain't real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole thing never really felt real, because this is what happens to other people. Right. You know, I was in my late 30s and getting close to 40, and like, this wasn't even a dream anymore. Yeah. This isn't even something that was on my bucket list, and it just kept happening.
Well, if I honestly don't know the tale, and I'm sure you're probably sick of talking about it, but what brought that to an end? Because you guys seem like you were burning bright. Yeah. And most people wouldn't have,
I know.
But I never heard any big drama either. So, you know what I mean? Like, I never heard one thing or another.
We've always, kept it personal.
Right.
And it's just, we couldn't work together anymore. Right. And it burned too bright. And it got to a point where I barely knew my family. I barely knew my kids. My kids barely knew me, and my wife as well. And when I came back home, it was like a round, square peg in a round hole, like trying to assimilate again and to become a part of it, and to slowly but surely realize that they had become independent of me and didn't need me around.
That's the hardest thing. Yeah. What you just touched on is the hard, because I go through that myself.
I know you
come
do.
Home and your kids are like,
you leave for a month.
We didn't miss you.
And as they get older, they get even more adaptable. Yeah. And you want them to be. I don't want them to sit.
But you also want them to miss you. That's when you know you've been on the road too much.
I wrote a song on Beulah that's called "I Want to Make You Cry," And part of it, that song means a lot of things for me. And one of those things is when I leave, I want you to miss me. I want you to mourn. And I can't help it. And I think it's a human thing to want that. And so I realized just how detached I was and just how much I was given to my career and not to them without being conscious about it. And it made me mad.
Yeah.
Made me really pissed off at myself because I always swore that I wouldn't be that guy. And I didn't think I was that guy. Yeah. That made me mad too, that I wasn't self-aware enough to know it. I think you grow up being taught to work hard, put your head down, and achieving and attaining things is a good thing. And you got to keep your head down and don't get above your raising, that whole thing.
Yeah.
But you get what you put into it. And I put a lot into it. And everything kept working. And we kept stepping up on rungs of the ladder. And it's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. It's the American dream. Yeah. And kind of asshole would walk away from that.
Yeah. Growth.
Well, I'm that kind of asshole. I figured out that I don't know that I figured out anything, but I was shown that some people are meant for that. My friend Donnie Fritz, Funky Donnie Fritz, one of my favorite artists of all time, he told me, he was like, I watched it playing with Chris Christopherson for 30 years. I watched people that their star was rising, and I saw them at a crossroads, and they knew I can go this way, and I can stay a family man and stay in touch with my family and raise my kids and see them grow up, or I can go this way and focus on my career and become a star. He said, more often than not, somebody had to choose one or two of those paths. And he said, there's not a right or a wrong. It's just who you are. It's just what you want and what you don't want and what matters and what, and you just have to make the choice. And there are a few folks out there that are able to do both. That are able to really, I think if you attain the status fast enough that you can afford to bring your family with you everywhere, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
That whole time it was
it's hard with kids too. Your kids can't just
I don't want them to live in a tour
and go.
bus.
Yeah.
No, and my wife would be miserable with that kind of life. So that wasn't an option. And I didn't see just quitting as an option because, again, small town guy, everybody's hopes and dreams are on your shoulders.
Right.
So, yeah, it was a traumatic time that it's not a surprise that I came out of it just not wanting anything to do with it anymore.
Right.
And realizing how great things are when you've got a good family relationship and a good base, which I hadn't had for 10 years.
So now with where your solo work is at, I mean, you're not starting over, it's not starting from square one, but there must be an element of like reintroducing yourself to your fans.
It most certainly is.
Is it really?
Because a lot of people don't know my name. They know my face.
Right.
And they know the music.
They know your voice.
Like here's a typical online social interaction between two people. And I've seen variances of this a million times. One person posts, going to see John Paul White tonight. So excited. Somebody posts, who the fuck is John Paul White? Next post, he was in the Civil Wars. Next post, oh my God, I love the Civil Wars, all caps. And I'll look at that and I just want to throw my phone through the wall.
That's what most social media makes me want to do. So
well,
yeah,
that
I
too.
get it. I get it.
But, and I'll go to towns. Like I was in Nashville, North Carolina in a bookstore. And two people came up and they were like, are you the guy from the Civil Wars? I said, yes. And, we're big fans. Oh, that's very sweet. I appreciate that. And they're like, what are you doing nowadays? Well,
playing tonight.
Playing right across the street in support of my new record. Yeah. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't know. We'll get tickets. And I'm like, I just want to, and so there's so much noise out there right now.
Yeah.
There's so much going on vying for your attention. And that's the lion's share of our label's work is trying to get people to pay attention. And so I feel like a brand new baby band
Right.
now. I obviously have things in my corner that a baby band doesn't, but I'm still, I'm back in the van and I'm still playing small places, and I'm perfectly okay with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it in a lot of ways, it's starting over and reintroducing myself to folks. Because I went dark for 2 years and didn't speak to a soul.
Right.
I cut all social media off. I cut
really?
all communication off, and I didn't actively try to keep anybody. I didn't want anybody to give a crap about me because I didn't care if they did. That's what was so strange about me wanting to go play songs for people, because I didn't give a crap what anybody thought about me for years.
What do you think brought you out of that?
The songs, those songs.
Were you writing that whole time?
No, I didn't even sing in the shower.
Really?
It was a year and a half at least before things started rolling around in my brain again. And when I told Jenny, my wife, that I was going to write a song, she was like floored, but not against it. But it was just like, well,
like she thought
you
that
should
was
do
gone.
that. Yeah.
Right.
We both thought it was gone.
Yeah, yeah.
And I told her I had melodies popping in my head and stuff, but I didn't know I was going to go down that road.
Yeah.
And it was scary telling her, because she knew as well as I did that I'd be back out here doing this again if I followed it.
Yeah.
And she said, if that's what's going on. She knew it'd been dormant, and that it came back. There must be a reason.
And do you find yourself keeping yourself in check in some, keeping an eye on that side of you?
Yeah.
Right.
I do. I can't give myself too much credit about anything more often than not. I learned everything the hard way.
Yeah.
But I'm learning now how to balance it all, and how much touring is enough and how much is not enough. And this is the longest run I've done since the breakup of the band. And it was scary booking it, but this record, my wife and I and the kids, we all sat down and talked about, giving it the old college try and seeing if we can get this to a place where I can comfortably tour just as much as I want and not any more than I want to.
Yeah.
But putting in the work right now to really lay the foundation for a career, a lifetime of playing in a healthy way, but not, chasing something. I could care less about fame and all that stuff, because I got to do what most people have never gotten to do.
Yeah.
That itch has been scratched. But now I genuinely like standing in front of people and singing songs to them. And I'm just actively trying to figure out a way to do that and be healthy and have a healthy family, and holler at me in a year from now and we'll talk again
At
about
the end of the tour cycle.
and where my head's at then,
Right,
because
yeah.
I may run screaming to the hills at that point.
Well, before you run screaming to the hills, would you like to play a song?
I'd love to play a song.
Right.
Let's see. I should probably do one of those that I wrote with the guys.
Oh yeah.
How
Please do.
about I'll do that. I wish I could write you a song. Is that cool?
Oh hell yeah.
All right, cool. I might get loud.
Okay.
All right. I wish I could write you a song. I have been trying so long. Every rhyme feels wrong. I wish I could come up with words that the world's never heard. I can't even finish a verse, a melody with harmony, soft and sweet, sounds like what it feels like when you take
down where the real feelings are, you'd hear real work of art. So please come over here next to me, lie in my arms silently, and I'll show you the things I can't see. A melody with harmony, soft and sweet, sounds like what it feels like when you dance with me. It sways and bends like violins, and it never ends, never ends. I will love you from this moment on, until my last breath is gone. But I wish I could write you a song. Oh, why can't I write you a song?
Fantastic.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
All right, that was John Paul White doing a beautiful solo acoustic version of I Wish I Could Write You a Song off his new record, The Hurting Kind. Make sure you get on over to walkingthefloor.com, because I'm going to put all sorts of links and cool stuff up there so you can check out where John Paul White is at when he's playing shows, when he's coming to a town near you. Let's do it. When you get done with that, yes, sir, you get on over to chrisshiflettmusic.com and you buy some tickets to those shows with the Cordovas at the end of August through the middle of September. Come on, America, get on it. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks with the Lumineers on Walking the Floor. That's it. Adios, amigo.